like to welcome you all to our fourth and final panel. This is, by tradition, where we sort of ask what's next, what to expect, where are gaps in our research, what have we learned so far that will help us go forward. Admittedly, we don't have every perspective on this panel, but we certainly have very necessary perspectives. Some perspectives we may not have, or some contradictory perspectives, and that's what the Q&A is for. So feel free to try to break these guys. But the question that we're asking all five of you, could you please share your perspectives on the challenges, opportunities, and trends in your respective fields? This would also be a great place to hear your thoughts on the impact of climate change in your arena. So to start things off, Ben Ford, ShoreRivers. And would you like to come up here, Ben?
Sure.
Voluntold.
Thanks, Tanner. I'm Ben Ford, Miles-Wye in Eastern Bay, Riverkeeper with ShoreRivers. Been on the job for about 6 months, so I'm really ready for the tough questions. So cue them up. Focusing on, this kind of local restoration idea in the watershed in which I work primarily. I'm thinking first of the Marylanders Grow Oysters program and how ShoreRivers' model of community engagement is building towards, this interest in oyster restoration and aquaculture in the Eastern Bay complex. So we've got, in this last season, we just in my watershed, we had 221 cages on docks, 63 different waterfront property owners. Now, this is, as we all know, a lot of this MGO program and CBS oyster gardening program, it's kind of a drop in the bucket when you compare it to an ORP planting. But these are people that we can call on to sign letters of support for legislation, for advocating for different policies within the watershed. These are people that when we go and meet with, and they're growing oysters on their dock for the MGO program, they often have a Taylor float or two where they're growing oysters on their own. I don't know if they're supposed to do that or not, but I close my eyes to that. We ShoreRivers work to raise quite a bit of money, primarily from these people that are growing oysters off their docks for these restoration programs, and to kind of have an add-on, a bonus to the ORP planting off Tillman Point this summer. And so that was about, Olivia, that was about 20 million oysters additional. Yeah. And we worked to kind of create that partnership with, this is Spat on Shell from HPL, and ORP did the organization. ShoreRivers raised the money from these waterfront property owners with support from local industry, Bosun's Marine that sells boats, and Smythe Jewelers. They donated $1,000 for every wedding ring sold during a specific period, and that all went into an oyster planting in Eastern Bay. A couple 100 yards from Scott's leases. So that's kind of what we see ShoreRivers anyway. What we're kind of spinning up to do is to build that coalition of people that want to help restoration. They want to grow oysters and they want to eat oysters. So what were the questions I was supposed to be answering, Tanner?
Where gaps in research are? What do you think the challenges in the future at a local level? And again, where do you see climate change driving some of this?
So I've been looking at, this is maybe a little micro rather than macro, but I'm really focused on the watershed in which I'm working. Parsons Island, which is south of Kent Narrows, privately owned, used to be owned by McCormick Spice Company, and as a corporate retreat, there was an archaeological dig there over a period of about 7 years. A few years ago, they wrapped up. And during that time, the lead archaeologist, kind of back of envelope, this is unscientific, but thinks that erosive forces on that island roughly equate to 68,000 dump trucks of sediment into Eastern Bay just off that one island. And, you know, in the Miles-Wye, Chop Tank, main stem of the bay, we see a lot of shoreline loss that's exacerbated by climate change, sea level rise. I don't know if you guys know, but Eastern Shore is pretty flat. Not a lot of topography. So that's the climate change. As far as oysters, that's a question for somebody else, I think.
Okay, we got them.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. And now, sort of broadening the lens, we're going to get a perspective at the regional level from Chris Moore, Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Good afternoon. Thanks for everyone who stayed around for the last presentation. That's you get a gold pin for that just for being here still. So on the regional perspective, I feel like having been here all day and heard all the great presentations before me, one of the things is I think I get to pick a little bit from a lot of the presentations because I think they're actually leading to what we'll be doing on a regional perspective moving forward, from new science, new approaches, new things like that. So I think luckily a lot of these things are going to come together. But when we think about regional restoration, at least in my view, over the last couple of years, the first thing is we've really started to be successful in this. You know, we went from doing lots of really small projects that some were successful, some weren't, to tributary scale restoration, you know, over the last 10 to 15 years. And if you look at that, a lot of the driver for that was the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement. And that is probably going to be the one goal of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement that we actually obtain when it expires in 2025. So I think we really should pat ourselves on the back and also obviously use that, you know, the old phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, comes to mind when we're doing this. So a little bit of this is, well, you know, where do we go next? And I think you've started to see some conversations about that. One of the, I won't say it's one of the bad things, but one of the things with the 10 trib strategy that was in the watershed agreement was, you know, 10 tribs were picked, and there were a lot of groups, a lot of really good groups doing restoration outside those 10 tribs. And they kind of said, well, what do we do? We're not one of the 10 tribs. And so moving forward, I think you're going to see a lot of opportunity for watershed groups to help become involved in regional restoration and show, look, we've got the people, we've got the volunteers, we've got the knowledge, we can help pick these big restoration projects and move forward with those. And so I think that's a real opportunity. I think in addition, NOAA has started to talk about some more tribs that were either based about ones that were in the Army Corps plan that dates back about 10 or 15 years ago, or other places that NGOs or academic institutions have said, hey, we want to do restoration moving forward. So I think that's another real opportunity there. Another piece on this is what is going to be the driver for regional restoration. Folks who are close to the Bay program, we're not sure if there will be another Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, what it'll look like, or when it will actually happen. So how do we move forward? Because we have a lot of momentum now, and we need to keep that momentum there. So, you know, being that we're in the environmental community, in the world of acronyms, I'm going to throw out another one this afternoon, CESAR. Maybe some of you all have heard about this, but this is CESAR is a report written by the Chesapeake Bay Program's Scientific Technical Advisory Committee, and it stands for Comprehensive Evaluation of System Response. Basically, what this has looked at is how have our bay restoration efforts, you know, over the past 20 years or so, where have we fallen short? Why have we fallen short? And what can we do to make that more successful? And so this is a report written by, I think, 60 about different scientists, a lot smarter than me. But when you boil that big report down, what it says is we need to stop worrying so much about water quality in the deep trench, you know, the 150-foot section of Chesapeake Bay, and we need to move into the shallows. There's no better group of restoration folks that are better ready to go into the shallows in the oyster restoration community. So we're there. And I think you're going to see maybe in this interim, while we're waiting for the next goal to come out of the Bay program and things like that, the CESAR report, maybe don't read the whole thing. There's a really, really good executive summary. It's only 2 pages, I think. Take a look at that. But I think that may be one of our big drivers moving forward when it comes to this. And so I think to hit Tanner's point, I think that's one of our real opportunities there. The one thing that concerns me about that, being I'll hit on challenges now too, is we work in a really, really busy space is what it amounts to. And some of you all represent those different. We've got aquaculture here. We've got restoration here. We've got folks who have been involved in commercial fishing in the past. We've got other research projects. We've got underwater grasses. It's a very busy space. And so we're going to have to adapt to make sure that we work with all those different users, all those different habitats, and make sure we're successful moving forward on that. Beyond that a little bit though, how I see things changing is kind of going back to that is, for the last 10 or 15 years, we've counted oysters. And as Stephanie Westby, who I think she's left at this point, said, or we counted acres. And that was really it. That's what we've been counting when it comes to regional restoration. I think you're going to see a much broader approach moving forward. We're going to talk about restoring oysters and SAV. We're going to start talking about how we do oyster restoration and aquaculture together, or do oysters that can be moved from an aquaculture site to a restoration site. Bring in the climate change piece. We're going to start thinking about doing oysters more and more as shoreline resilience. And then, as we saw today with a presentation earlier about the nutrient credit trading opportunities, maybe we actually will start seeing oyster restoration projects specifically for nutrient credit trading, things like that, or at least that'll be a big part of that. So there's new opportunities on the forefront. The last thing I'll kind of talk about is where's the funding going to come from? We've had different funding sources, some of it relatively stable from the states. In a couple of cases, we've had larger infusions of funds. A couple of years ago, Virginia put forth for the first time $10 million in general funds to help this type of effort move forward. But right now we might be more awash in money than we will be in a long time. So with the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a lot of funding out there. And that's another reason why I think a lot of what we're going to be doing restoration wise is kind of multifaceted, because a lot of those funds and those grant programs are set up to work on multiple habitats, a shoreline next to an oyster reef, a buffer off maybe an aquaculture operation with a living shoreline component and things like that. So I think moving forward, we're going to see more of that restoration, which is not just oyster restoration, but oyster restoration, which we all know is a really good thing. There's lots of ecosystem services there, but I think you're going to see more landscape scale type restoration, thinking about different habitats moving forward. And I think that gives us lots of opportunities because our science is really well developed. We know how oysters affect other species that are out there, and we can find some win-wins, not only for oysters, but for other ecosystems as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'd like to welcome up James Tweed, Hollywood Oyster Company, giving us a perspective from independent oyster grower. Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I apologize for Tao. He wasn't able to make it. He was scheduled to be here and I got called in at the last minute. But a little background on our farm. We are located on the Patuxent River off of Hollywood, Maryland in St. Mary's County. We've got 20 acres of bottom leased, and on that we do a cage on bottom grow out method. The bottom there is ideal for that. It's very sandy. It's a sandy, hard packed, firm bottom. So we do the traditional tray cage as well as a bag cage. For the first year of their life, the oysters will spend in the bag cages, and then we transfer them over to the tray cages. We do that because we've had a lot of trouble with crab predation. To get to your question about where we need to grow and what kind of innovation we need. We've got 20 acres leased, and just about all of that is completely covered with cages. We've got a couple thousand cages of the tray cages, and we got about 750 of the bag cages. And those cages probably occupy probably less than 25% of our leased bottom there. So as we grow, we need to look at ways to get more cages on there. And right now what we do is we do a long line, cages attached to the long line. We pick the long line up and pull the cages in. It's a real simple, easy way to access our cages, but it's not very efficient use of our leased bottom. And it goes back to, I think, Don's point that, we're still using the old tractor to try to harvest these oysters. So as we grow, we're going to be trying to come up with ways to use that bottom more efficiently. Also, the other problem we're running into is we're running out of space and time in a day to do all the work we need to do. So as we're growing, we use to sort our oysters, we use a traditional tumble tube, and we've got 3 of those on our docks now that are going pretty much all day long. And we're getting to the point now where we can only flip so many cages and run those oysters through that tube so fast. So we're looking to come up with ways to make that whole process, the sorting, grading process, a little more efficient, so we can grow and scale that way. I know Vim's, I think, has a demonstration farm, I think, where they work on some of the gear issues. I don't think we have anything like that in Maryland, do we?
We had at one point, it probably come back.
So right now, I mean, our only option is just trial and error. You know, come up with an idea, make something, try to put it out there, see how it works. So it'd be nice to see if we could get more support from research on how to actually grow and use our bottom and come up with more efficient equipment. Biologically, our oysters are growing great. We've had a couple of really good years. Everything's growing really, really well. Fouling, we don't have many issues with fouling. I think our biggest issue recently has been sea squirts. I don't know if this is a bay-wide issue, but we've been getting, you know, a cage can come up and it'll be 2 to 3 times what it traditionally weighs, just because there's so many sea squirts in there. And they haven't really been affecting the oysters, but the weight and it, you know, it stresses the guys out who had to pick these cages up, and it stresses the equipment out. So I don't know if there's any way to remediate sea squirts or any thoughts on that, but that's a major issue for us. Regarding climate change, you know, the waters are getting warmer. You know, it's led to a longer growing season. I think we used to stop seeing growth in November, and now that's getting pushed almost to December. We'll see growth, which I guess is a good thing. But in the summertime, we get our water can be like bathtub warm. I mean, it gets pretty warm, and I'm not sure, you know, how much more the oysters can take or what their stress level is on that, but I think that's going to be an issue. Also, just in general, just weather anomalies. We're lucky we put all of our gear on the bottom, so we don't, you know, we plan it and forget it. And we haven't had any major issues with weather. It does beat up our equipment, our docks take a beating, but that would be probably what we've seen on climate change. So what do we got?
Thank you, James. And again, thanks for stepping up for Tal. Much appreciated. Okay, Mr. Jordan Shockley, Blue Oyster Environmental, with a perspective from the private sector. Blue Oyster Environmental is much more than an oyster grower, and as you've heard today, ever expanding. So take it away, Jordan.
No, thank you, Tanner, and thanks for you know, putting on a great event. Appreciate having me here. Yes, I'm Jordan Shockley, co-founder and CEO of Blue Oyster Environmental. Blue Oyster Environmental is now majority owner also of Hoperzon Oyster Company. So kind of adding to what we're doing. And Blue Oyster Environmental really was founded in 2019 to really spearhead kind of the next step that we saw as an industry, and that was around nutrient credit trading. And really see that as an opportunity to fuel a lot of the growth in the industry that's really going to take us to that next level. But really where we see ourselves now is a vertically integrated oyster company that really does and provides the infrastructure that the industry is going to need in order to grow. So we saw a little bit of that last night. There's really 2, I think, main points of growth that we see as far as, you know, getting the industry there. And that's one around processing, post-harvest processing, which you got to see a little bit of that last night at the packing house, where we're going to bring an HPP machine and Acuff, which is really going to not be a tool just for us, but really the industry. And that's aquaculture, that's wild fishery. And it's a way to add value to the product, get and expand markets, not just regionally, but nationally and potentially even internationally. And then the other side of that is around restoration and nutrient trading. And the reason for that is we see that as really being a key part about growing aquaculture. It's, providing that additional value add to the growers that are out there that are, growing oysters and, spending years growing oysters, harvesting them, and then being able for them to be able to leverage that ecological value that their farms are providing back into their operations to allow them to continue to grow and to make more money. And the other part of that, which we talked about a little bit, was around restoration. And with the new BMP and oyster reef restoration as a way to mitigate nutrients, that's a really big tool now that we can put into play, not just for restoration and private restoration, but also potentially within the public fishery, to allow the public fishery to benefit from that through some rotational harvesting and those sorts of practices. And the other part of that too is living shorelines and resiliency projects. There's a big opportunity, I think a big demand for that. And that's another way to leverage additional value into that. We have a lot of talented people in the industry that, we can use them to access a lot of these things now. It's not just commercial fishing or aquaculture. We can use, those talented people to get involved in restoration and build on that. So yeah, I hope to get some more questions about that and looking forward to speaking to everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. We have been referring everybody to the bio sheet and not doing these formal introductions. And, the nonprofit sector and academic sector has some really lengthy titles. This one is just egregious. Bill Walton, A. Marshall Acuff, Senior Professor of Marine Science and Shellfish Aquaculture Program Coordinator. VIMS. Okay. Bill Walton, please come up here and we're going to do a perspective on aquaculture baywide.
Yeah, I apologize. When you get hired for a new job, sometimes they give you several hats. And so if you want to read the different hats that I wear, you can check that out. But yeah, I'm Bill Walton. I'm with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And what I wanted to talk about is I was hired a couple years ago as the coordinator of VIM's Shellfish Aquaculture program. And so we have a lot of people at VIM's that do a lot in shellfish aquaculture. And one of the things we were trying to do was bring that together. And so the first thing I did is sat down with the industry and people at VIM's and talked about what do we want to do. And we came up with a mission. And the mission of the VIM Shellfish Aquaculture program embraces the idea of shellfish aquaculture. We want to support a thriving, sustainable shellfish aquaculture industry here in Virginia, Chesapeake Bay, and more broadly. We support that. We want that to succeed. And so to Tanner's questions, you immediately start thinking about, well, so what's ahead? Like, where are the challenges? Where are the opportunities? And at VIMS, we put those into 3 different buckets. The first bucket is sort of your biological and environmental ability to produce shellfish. And so when I think about climate change and I think about what that will bring, that is where I see the biggest challenges. That's where we're going to see things like these unusual mortalities that we see in oysters. If I'm a shellfish farmer, we need to solve that. I mean, there's just no way that we can have unexplained die-offs of oysters of over 50%. I mean, we need to bring the science to bear on that and solve that problem. It's hard for the industry to be sustainable and economically sustainable and persist if we don't solve that. And of course, we expect lots of challenges with the changes that climate change will bring. Some of those, as James said, some may be longer growing seasons, but we need to think about what those are. And we expect that it'll be sort of a lot of different factors changing. Beyond the biological and environmental capacity, then we think about the human capacity. And we really break that into 2 different parts. And one is anybody who has a shellfish farm, have you had trouble getting help? A little bit. So skilled and willing labor is something that we know we need to work on. So having workforce development that meets the needs of the industry. So it's great that at VIMS we produce PhDs and masters, but we need to be thinking about what the industry needs and what are the skills and capabilities that the industry needs, because without that, the industry doesn't thrive. And if you're not in the industry, you might say, why care? And I would say, because we want those shellfish in the waters of Chesapeake Bay. And if we have shellfish farmers that will do that and have the skilled, capable workers to do that, we will have more shellfish in the bay, and that's good for all of us. The other part of that human bin, though, I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end just to help prompt discussion, but that's informed communities. Look, I'm a fan of shellfish aquaculture. I do not say that every community should have shellfish aquaculture. I can't go to public hearings and say this farm should be approved. That's not my role. But I do think that communities in Chesapeake Bay should have the best available science when they're making decisions about whether they are going to permit shellfish aquaculture in their communities. I think those hearings are dominated by homeowners with a view of the farms, and generally we're not engaging the rest of the community that might care about what the impacts might be on habitat value and water quality. So I think we just need to do a better job of engaging communities with that science. The third bin will seem really weird for a marine science institute, and that is helping increase consumer demand. Why would I care about that? Because let's say the people in this room are wildly successful and we meet the biological environmental challenges and we meet the human challenges. That means you're growing more shellfish. We don't succeed. This industry doesn't succeed unless those shellfish are sold. And we want this industry to grow. Therefore, we need to increase demand. And so I think that's actually a part of the mission because we plan for success. We try to protect against failure, but we plan for success. And so that is something. I do server trainings at restaurants. I engage with chefs and help talk up the different varieties of shellfish. Again, I don't advocate for any particular brand of shellfish, but I certainly advocate strongly for U.S. produced shellfish being on menus. So those are sort of the buckets that we see challenges and opportunities. The two things that when I look ahead that I wanted to maybe help prompt discussion with is I think it is fantastic to see the Alliance bring together restoration, fisheries, and aquaculture. I was probably on a phone call about 10 years ago with some restoration practitioners at the federal level who shall remain unnamed, where essentially aquaculture was off the table as something that could be part of restoration. That can't be restoration. People are harvesting and there's plastic involved and there's gear. That doesn't look like restoration to me. And it was essentially removed from the conversation. My view is that we get more shellfish as the public in Chesapeake Bay if we do all three of those things. And it has been tremendous to me to see the change in the restoration and the fisheries community and aquaculture coming together and thinking about how we can work together. So I thought the point you made was fantastic about the opportunities there. The other one, I just want to throw out a challenge. One of the things I've seen suggested for the way forward for shellfish aquaculture is, many of you know, in the Chesapeake and in many parts of the US, one of the biggest constraints is social license. That it's not that I don't know that I don't want to have a farm, that I think I can make it profitable, but I can't get the permit. And so how do you address that? And so thinking a little bit about that, to me, there is an opportunity here to think about how we do that. One of the strategies I have heard is we should move it into deeper water and we should move it offshore. We should get out of everybody's sight. I am not ready to concede that argument. I think my community is better off with shellfish farms in it. And I don't see why I should make all of them have something that's more dangerous and more costly and unproven as the solution forward. So I would just challenge this community to think about, is that necessarily where we should be pushing the aquaculture industry to go? Sort of, you can do that, but not here where I can see it, is not a particularly satisfying solution to me. So I will stop there and leave lots of room for discussion.
Thank you, Bill. I could have let that one go. Very nice. Very well said. Okay. So last check, Dave, do we have any questions on Zoom at this time? So we're going to dig deep into this room. Okay. 30 minutes. We don't have to use all of it, but it is, I know it's the end of the day. I've got a couple of primes, so I'll give you all a minute. And we'll look to all of you online to please submit your questions as well. Okay. Are the sudden and unexplained mortalities in oysters something any of you are seeing as a major challenge to the industry or to restoration here in the Bay? We can, Bill. I'm sorry.
I will start if this is on. Pick it up.
Yep.
Got me?
Yep.
Certainly, this is something that we've heard about in Virginia for many years. We're getting fewer reports of it. But one of the concerns is unusual is relative. So unusual mortalities that you see over and over again suddenly don't become unusual. So we're not getting as many calls. But I will say, working with Ryan Carnegie at BIMS, he gets a lot of calls and I get a lot of calls. And we have seen from Massachusetts down around into the Gulf of Mexico, we're getting calls from growers who are experiencing a surge in the spring and summer in sudden deaths of oysters that you can't easily explain. It's not because of some low salinity event or something like that. And it's heartbreaking because it is not, it's something that, again, we need to solve. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I think kind of two separate perspectives here, but if you look at it from an aquaculture standpoint, any sudden mortality is always an issue. We work with growers, around the country on equipment and seed, and we've heard some things happening in North Carolina. I think everyone's aware of. Luckily, not so much here on the Chesapeake, but moving forward, that's always an issue that we want to make sure that we're staying ahead of. Anytime that a farmer loses oysters is a bad thing. If they're not being sold, they're just dying. So from that perspective, it's obviously an issue. And then on the restoration side, if we start talking about doing projects that are specifically built for nutrient reductions, there's a standard that you're being held to, and you have to be able, that reef has to perform in order for that project to be successful. So when you spend a lot of time and money into restoring a reef, that reef then has to be successful in order to pass along an ecological benefit. So we never want to see any sort of die off that's sudden, that's going to at some time maybe stop the flow of nutrient credits to a buyer that then has to be made up. So that's a major issue. I think that us as an industry and the community want to stay on front of for a variety of reasons.
I might just add a little bit from the restoration perspective. We haven't seen as much unexplained, but we're definitely seeing changes in mortality. I think luckily the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen an unprecedented amount of spat death in our waterways, and that's not going to last forever. This year, a good example, I think both states, Maryland, Virginia, are reporting about 25% mortality, probably mostly because of higher salinity. If you go back to 2018, it was a freshet that we had that disrupted, especially the industry, but also restoration for about 1.5 to 2 years. So we've got to keep working through those issues. And I think one, science plays a big role in that, but it also, we need to make sure we're not resting on our laurels and saying, what we've seen the last 3 or 5 years is what we're going to see forever, and know that we're going to have some changes moving forward, whether it's in aquaculture or whether it's in restoration. We need to be prepared for that.
Thank you.
We've been real lucky. We haven't seen any kind of unexplained mortalities in any of our oysters, but we typically have some mortality over winter. We'll clean that up in the spring, but summertime it hasn't been too bad yet. But I mean, is it just a matter of time before we do? I think it probably is, and so I think it's something that's definitely needs to be looked at more.
It's good to hear. Okay. Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question? I will call on you. Everybody's eyes are averting. Scott Budden knew it.
Thanks, Tanner. This is more, I guess, for an industry question for the 3 folks up there that interact with industry more, but interested in your perspective on what do you think the largest impediment to industry growth is? If you look at Maryland numbers, we've took a little dip, 18, all that rain, and then it's kind of leveled out. It's kind of stayed 90,000 or so bushels a year, it looks like, and at least on the Maryland side. So what is holding us back? There's a lot, but what do you think maybe the number one thing is?
I think a big part of his market. We talk about processing. I think that's a big reason why. So one of the things that growing more oysters is great, but then all of those oysters are being sold into the same market, and sometimes at the same type of product. So we want to be able to diversify the types of products that are available as an industry, so that we can get out of any sort of regional kind of watering down of that market potentially, and expand to maybe outside of local markets and more regional or national markets, so that, you know, more Maryland growers or Chesapeake Bay growers are selling their oysters now in the Midwest or the West Coast or even overseas into Europe. So I think that's a big one. I think that hatchery production is another one. You know, we've got more and more growers coming in. So that means we need, you know, more hatchery production in order to meet that demand. I mean, we're getting calls now, and here it is in October, almost November, about, you know, do you guys have any seed available? And that's because they're not able to fulfill that throughout the year. So those are two big ones, and there's a number of others as well, but there's two to come to mind.
I'd agree with, is this on? I'd agree with marketing also. I think again, as we get more and more growers, it's going to be more and more competition and it's Bill. I think your point about educating the, you know, I think we're fortunate to be in Maryland that, you know, we've got a seafood kind of is built into our culture here, but not the rest of the country is like that. And I think, you know, at one time oysters used to be the you know, the exotic protein that you could ship across the country and send in rail cars, and people all over the country would eat them. And I don't think there's that appreciation nationwide for oysters anymore. And I think we need to go back and educate, encourage, and show people that there's oysters are really good to eat. I think you know, I think as growers, as aquaculture growers, I think we're in a unique position that we're not, you know, there's guys harvesting wild oysters and they have to compete in a commodity. And I think we've got a unique position is that we don't have to compete in that commodity, not yet, at least, you know. And as you get more and more people into it, the price, you know, is either we got to keep demand up or the price is going to start to come down. And that would be something I think we need to make sure that as we grow, there are markets out there to keep up with that growth.
I'll just add, you know, I agree with all the points. Thing I would add to that is it's been interesting to see clearly new markets are what you need. We get a lot of local competition, and you can flood those local markets and it create problems. So getting new markets, and then you say, well, but that can only go so far. But in my experience, not as an economist, but as an oyster eater and work, it has been fascinating to me to see how that, as the supply of oysters has grown, the number of oyster bars in places like St. Louis and Chicago have increased dramatically. So it's not, it's a market that we have grown with the growth of the market of production. We've seen the market grow, and so I don't know. I'm going to age myself, but I don't remember getting sushi in gas stations when I was a kid. And now you can get sushi in gas stations. I know, so I'm not suggesting oysters in gas stations. I do eat gas stations, but I do think that it almost sounds inconceivable. Like, how could it become a common thing? But I think there's a way towards that. To Don Webster's point, we have to think about price point. You have to think about different levels. Are there high end and are there lower end prices to do that with? But also the cooked market. The idea of, I would argue, I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, that the food, when they start making choices when they're 30 and 40 about what they feed their family with and what they're choosing for animal protein, I think that shellfish are very well positioned for being a protein that families will want to choose. When you think about the energy that goes into raising some of the terrestrial meat that we eat, and then potable water, I think that is a story we are not telling for the industry. It's not just non-fed. You are not using potable water. I mean, maybe there's some power washing, but like compared to what it takes to raise a chicken or a cattle, we're not using potable water. And I think that could be a limiting resource in the future that people are going to care about. And so I think we're well positioned to be a nutritious and environmentally friendly food. So I think there's potential for growth in the market.
Oysters and gas stations. If you heard it here first, if you're listening, Shell Corporation. Okay, we have a, yes.
We have a few questions online. One is, we just planted a new spat on Shell Reef with about 270,000 oysters. What are the essential data points to be gathered, and what are the most economical methodologies?
Is this just for restoration? Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, let's assume this is a reef restoration. I mean, I think one thing, hopefully, there's some background data that shows what was there beforehand. And that may be easy because there may not have been any hard substrate there to begin with, and you can assume it's basically zero. But I think that's obviously one thing. I think after that, what's important is probably, I mean, to be honest, annual, I think is the best if you can do that, taking annual samples to see what your growth rate is, see what your mortality is, and also get a feel for what else is happening on the reef. You know, I work a lot in the southern part of the bay. Boring sponge is a huge problem for us down there. So that's something that you don't have in other parts of the bay that you need to be worried about. So I think those are the most important, is looking at what your mortality is in a given year, what your growth rate is. Spat set's going to be important too, to make sure the reef is self-sustaining over a long term. But those would be the most important from my perspective.
Coming from the room.
So I have a question about like pathology reports, and this year, you know, it's nice to have a hatchery that does them for you, but then when you start to look at other areas to get oysters from, you got to figure that out for yourself. This year I had to learn how to use dry ice. I had to ship things, like overnight it, pay for overnighting again because I put 15 pounds of dry ice in a cooler, which was way too much, and I froze everything. I guess my question is, how possible is it to do these tests like at home on like the front line? And it doesn't have to be a perfect test, but it could give some sort of indicator. And then when you see an indication, then start bombarding VIMs or Horn Point or, you know, people with PhDs to start looking into this.
I'll chime in. I don't know of any sort of affordable test or easy test to do. I'm not a pathologist, so like when I'm working on a research farm, I start to see something go sideways. I don't have any solution except to, if it looks like it's going to be a problem, then I would take something in and try to get some pathology on it. You know, I don't know if Maryland has disease monitoring. But sometimes you can learn something from proxies, like in the Gulf of Mexico, there was a dermo watch. And so you didn't have to have animals necessarily from your site to see, okay, the disease is up this year. I don't know what it is on my farm, but I know disease is up. I should be paying attention to that. So maybe there might be something like that. And I don't know if somebody from Maryland DNR or if there is a disease monitoring program. Don?
Yeah, like we have at the hospital.
For those on Zoom, you're saying at the Oxford lab, there is somebody that does.
So you're saying like cost is like the major?
I don't think it's cost so much as expertise. There's just no sort of rapid test for disease. There's no, you know, I can't get my oyster. Here's another, I can't get my oyster COVID test at home kit, right? Like, those probably could be developed, but that I don't know of any.
We've had our oysters tested. I mean, we've sent them over. I forget the gentleman's name, but I think the turnaround time wasn't that great. But we just wanted to have some tests done. We were seeing some stuff and just curious what was going on, and we sent them off to Maryland, and we didn't. I mean, they came back clean, but
one of the challenges with disease is, what are you going to do with the information? Like, what practical steps can you take? We don't feed the shellfish, so I can't suddenly prescribe antibiotics for them on my farm if I have that. So I think it's really more of an index of, okay, I've got a problem coming up. If this stuff can go to market, I should move it to market. Maybe I can move it to an area that has less disease, but I talked to my disease person before I did that to find about spreading disease. But right now, it tends to be more as a way to explain a mortality rather than I don't know if you guys have seen sort of a proactive step that you can
there's
take.
nothing you can really do. I think you're right. There's nothing you can do with the. We were just looking to
Right.
figure out, make sure there wasn't something bad coming down the road.
I mean, some of that could be in the brood stock that you're getting that whatever selected line you're asking for, is it bred for disease resistance? Could be a way to help plan ahead again.
Do we have any more online? Okay.
Does anyone have any thoughts on how we can fix lease permitting in Maryland? There are currently 1,650 acres of lease applications in the process, with some over 3 years in the process.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big constraints to growth, is leasing and permitting. One thing that was talked about early on was this idea of aquaculture enterprise zones, which were zones that the regulatory agencies determined was kind of open for potential leasing. So it was large areas that were kind of pre-approved for an aquaculture lease. And I think that that's still a very useful potential tool to have is areas around the bay or its tributaries that are, here's a great spot that is kind of pre-approved that you can come in and get a lease and, be approved within 60 days or 90 days. It's really tough for a new business, especially that, a waterman, for instance, that wants to, start growing oysters, and they have to, put in a permit. They do all the legwork and going out and finding a good spot and meeting with homeowners and potential, other, users of that space and get all of the support. And then they submit it to the department, and they wait a year and a half to get a lease, and it really puts them behind. So I think that, that's a way to kind of streamline that process in certain areas would be great. And yeah, I think that's one of the biggest kind of risk in growth as well.
I've worked with a lot of those over the years. The Aquaculture Coordinating Council actually had created aquaculture enterprise zones a number of years ago, before we revised our lease program. And we had meetings with watermen, property owners in Anne Arundel County. Finally ended up with a site in the Patuxent River that was going to be a enterprise zone. We had a lot of interest from back then with water column leaseholders with gear. The idea was we would do that and they would be able to get a lease within 3 to 6 months. The problem we ran into was with the federal government, because you can't just get a lease, you got to have the federal permit. And the feds had a big problem about basically saying, okay, free for all, we'll just, you could get a lease in 3 months. When the lease program was revised in Maryland, when we met in 2008, basically wiped out 100 years worth of garbage that had accumulated on the books. And at that point, when we started to see a lot of the leases going out, the AEZ, it was taken off the books. But it's a good concept to be able to take a place like one of the areas we're looking is Eastern Bay. State's done a lot of work in monitoring in Eastern Bay right now. What's in there? What areas are there for public restoration? What areas are for public harvest? To me, I would take anything that's left and say, let's make it an enterprise zone and use it for, get a lease in 3. We have some leases that are 4 years now. They're not part of the problem was COVID. You couldn't have your public meetings. The court system basically shut down. Employees went on telework, and that really backed things up. But hopefully we'll make some progress from that.
I think the enterprise zone is a good idea. It's a good concept, but you get a lot of people who have waterfront property who want to, like, for example, the company I work for, my employer, he had the 300 acres farmland in St. Mary's County, and he had all this waterfront in front. It was an ideal situation for him to start an oyster farm. So I think you still need to have a mechanism for people who are to get a lease adjacent to their property, or on an area that's outside of like an enterprise zone.
One of the things we did.
Hold on, Don Webster.
Virginia has about 140,000 acres, I believe, that are under lease, and as I heard yesterday, about 30% of it is actually used. Maryland, we decided if you're going to lease it, it's a public resource. If you're going to lease it, you got to use it. It belongs to everybody in the state of Maryland, from a waterman whose family been on the bay for 200 years to somebody, a ski resort operator in Garrett County. But if you're going to use that, you're going to take it up and you have to use it. And we have an active use program, and I think that's worked well. We had some leases that have been families for 3 generations when we revised things, and had people we'd call, my granddaddy on his deathbed said, don't never give that up because they ain't making no more. So, well, we're making new ones now. You're either going to use it or you're going to lose it.
Thank you, Don.
And just a little update to Don's comments. Virginia actually just went through a new leasing guidelines program. It's about 2 years old, and we're trying to get at that issue too, because you're right. We have leases in Virginia that have been in place 50 years and they haven't seen production. And so as our lease term in Virginia is 10 years. And so as those leases come up, we will start seeing those turn over and go to that, because you're right. It's a huge problem in Virginia as well.
Okay, we'll take one more online.
Does the potential of industrializing production present major issues to the industry, as industrialization of farming tends to do? And what issues might we be looking at ahead? And do we see ways to curb these issues ahead of time?
So, one of the reasons, I was a marine biologist who fell in love with shellfish aquaculture, and then I just fell in love with the shellfish aquaculture community. The folks who do it are great. And so certainly it's a concern for me when we start. I understand the need for efficiency. I do have concerns about advocating and developing technologies that could put people out of work. And so I'm fascinated with what the SAM project, for example, the University of Maryland can do. I accept that it may be the future. But it is something I think we need to be thinking about, how that will affect communities where rural coastal communities, where one of the biggest benefits of shellfish aquaculture, I think, has been that it provides jobs, maybe not a ton, but much needed jobs in those rural coastal communities. And so we want to be thinking about how do we protect those good jobs doing that. I think, one way to think about that is technologies, and I was talking with Jonathan Van Senten, who's at Virginia Tech about this, that there are technologies that can increase efficiency and replace labor, but then there's also technologies that can improve safety and efficiency for the people who are doing the work. And so I think that there's room for both those things, and I think bigger forces than us will decide what works best. But I think it's worth exploring both.
Thank you.
I have
Yep,
one thing
please.
to add to that. I think that technology is going to be an important part of the industry going forward. We can't not move forward, in the industry if we're really trying to get scale, because a lot of that is going to produce more jobs, and more oysters we grow, the more demand we're going to have, maybe not just on the farm, but also in those kind of secondary benefits in processing and hatchery production. On the delivery side, transportation, those sorts of things. So it kind of, it goes down the line as far as the industry grows, and maybe some of those jobs are, less available on the farm, but they're going to be more available in all these other spaces. Processing is a big one for us. And we think that incorporating technology into processing is going to, create additional jobs. It's going to bring kind of that next level to the industry that we need. And it's going to allow for more people to get involved. So I think that, I think there is a risk, and especially in the coastal communities, where I think capital costs are a barrier to entry in a lot of places. But I also think that there could be programs that kind of help offset that, which you see in the more traditional ag spaces, that there's a lot of, potential benefits or programs that can help support people getting started in that.
And sorry, I do think not only is there room for technology, there's room in the marketplace for both. So I think you could still have sort of what we're doing now for shellfish aquaculture could continue even if you had super efficient bottom culture that was producing McNugget oysters, which that's great. There are a lot of jobs. There's a lot of food in that. That's important. But I think that it's important to realize that I think that the boutique market, the handcrafted oysters could persist in that.
I think we're talking about oysters also, and I think the more oysters we put in the water, the better the water is going to get. And it's not like livestock where you're generating more livestock, you're generating more waste, you're consuming more food, you're consuming more water. If you're planting 1 million acres of corn, if you got this one monocrop of corn and the issues that come with that, put more oysters in the water, you've got more gear in the water, you've got more habitat for other things. It's impossible for us to keep everything out of our cages, so we've got oysters in the water, we've got the gear in the water. There's going to be more biological activity around those structures. So, but I think at this point it's impossible to tell. I mean, it's just see how it evolves and try to solve problems as we create them, or if they're created.
All right, let's give our panelists a big hand. Okay. So in conclusion, there's no way to summarize the waterfall of information that we've had here today. I was ballparking it. There's easily a few hundred years of experience working with oysters in this room. That's probably a low estimate. And of course, this is just a fraction of the talent and imagination and experience that we have dedicated to the oyster here in the Bay. And we're very lucky that these brilliant people call this place home. And in fact, have generations of people, and as evidence in this room, to stay in oystering. I just want to thank you all very much for being here today. I do have some thanks I'd like to do. I want to start by thanking all the partners of the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance. Not everyone can be here today, obviously, but every single one of you makes us what we are. In particular, I'd like to thank Greenfin Studio, who's making this look so easy. It is not. So thank you all very much. Blue Oyster Environmental, ShoreRivers, University of Maryland, and Chesapeake Bay Foundation, especially my amazing CBF crew who helps put this all together. And in particular, Ryan Westfall and Alexis Stelfox for just making it happen. So again, thank you all online for participating. Those of you that are here, I hope you join us for a very, very happy hour at Michter's Library downstairs. And I encourage you to do the same at home. Thank you all very much.